Welcome back to Babbling by the Brook. I'm Mark Hoebee, Paper Mill Playhouse's producing artistic director. You know, it's no surprise here at the theater that West Side Story is one of my all-time favorite musicals. And I was so honored back in 2016 to finally have the opportunity to direct it on our stage. I'm overjoyed today to bring back three of the stars from that production to talk with us. Belinda Allyn, who played Maria, Natalie Cortez, who played Anita, and Matt Doyle, who was a fabulous Tony. Oh my goodness, here we are back together again.
I know, it's so lovely. It's so good to see you guys.
All of you look so amazing.
Oh, that's sweet.
I have to just say, to start off, we'll get into the specifics, but you know this already, but this production for me was so uniquely special. There are not enough words, although we'll talk for another 30 minutes about it and other parts of West Side Story, but the collaboration and working with the three of you and the rest of this amazing company and the result was so incredible. I don't know that anything will top it in my career as a director. So I am starting off just by thanking you for lending your gifts and your generous souls to making it so terrific. And I love you. This sounds like we're signing off, but we're just
Yeah.
But I want to say, so West Side Story, my first introduction to West Side Story was actually my mother, who saw the original production with Larry Kurt and Carol Lawrence and singing along on the hi-fi stereo system in our living room to the original cast album and screaming Maria at the top of my lungs, and had never even seen the show. But before I'd seen the movie or anything, but tell me a little bit about your introduction to the show. Like, when did you first learn about West Side? Natalie, how did you first come into your world?
Well, my mom's French and Spanish, half French, half Spanish. So when she came over to this country, she'd never seen musical theater before, and she fell in love. And so when I was growing up, my Disney was old movie musicals, you know, Fred Astaire, Singing in the Rain, all of those. And ever since Singing in the Rain, I immediately honed in on Rita Moreno. And then I found West Side when I was about 8 or 9. And that was it. I watched it every single day, learned the dances from, like, in my little living room in New York City, put on piles and piles of my mom's old skirts and would like whip around. And I would do all the parts, of course, not just that. I would do all the parts. I do all the monologues, crying in the bathroom mirror. I was just enthralled with it. And that's just little girl dreams.
Amazing. Matt, how did you find it?
Yeah, so I first discovered West Side Story when I was a kid because my parents used to kind of throw on old movies and they introduced us to the classics at first. We started seeing shows locally. I am originally from Beverly, Massachusetts. I was born and raised in Manchester by the Sea, and so North Shore Musical Theater was there, and that was like my first introduction to seeing musicals, and I was pretty enthralled at a young age. And my parents made sure to bring home all the Rodgers and Hammerstein films, and West Side Story was one of the first films that they brought home as well, and introduced it to all of us when we were just kids. And that was like the cool one, you know. That was the one that I was like, wow, it can be this exciting and this mature, because it was such a mature story, I think, at a young age after seeing much more lighthearted shows. And I was hooked. I remember the intro and the overture and that first scene, and seeing that probably when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and just thinking, oh, this is a whole nother level. Like, this is something that I just watch every hour of every day. And that was my first time watching West Side Story. It was the film.
Belinda.
Mine was also the film. There was something so iconic and beautiful about that original movie make of the stage show. I ended up going in for the first leg of the non-union tour in college, but it was for Anita. So when I got my first ever appointment for Maria, I was like, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to be going in for. And then here we are. And that was that.
It's funny because West Side has been a part of my life for so many years. It was one of the very first shows I ever did. I was 14 at a local community theater and I played Baby John. My brother still talks about how I had a smirk on I didn't even know what theater was really. I kind of had this half smirk on my face the whole time, fisheye looking at the audience. And like Natalie, I didn't know how to be in a show. I memorized everybody's parts, everybody's lines. I used to recite the whole show to my brother. We shared a bedroom at night. And that was kind of a blur. And then fast forward, I did it in college. My first semester in college, I was in a production at Northwestern University. And I played action. And Baby John at that time was played by Michael Greif. I think you all know. And Tony was Greg Edelman. Diesel was Mark Moses from Desperate Housewives, and Anita was Megan Mullally.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my gosh.
Crazy. And then
Wow.
I did it a few times in regional theater, and I even tried to choreograph it. But I didn't really understand the show until I got into Jerome Robbins Broadway, and all the choreography was in there, and worked with Jerome himself and learned the choreography. And it's such an incredible piece of theater because of the marriage of book music, lyrics, and choreography, right? That whole storytelling, like what you were saying, really about the prologue, right? All that history of what's happening up until the show begins happens danced in the prologue. And it's so specific and so good. But what was your first, so Belinda, what was your first time performing the show? When were you in it?
I did the show with our choreographer, Alex Sanchez, at Riverside Theater in Vero Beach, Florida. That was my first time performing it, and that was how I got my equity card. That was the first time I got an appointment for Maria, and I thought it was a joke because I didn't think that was who I was in the show. And then I saw Natalie dance it, and I was like, yeah, I'll never be an Anita. But yeah, so that was my first time doing the show, and there's such a magic of, if I were allowed to play that role for the rest of my life, I would totally do it. It's such a perfect show. And I actually remember seeing that Paper Mill was doing West Side the next season while I was in Florida doing the show. And I was like, I want to do that production. And I don't know if it's the secret and I manifested it, but somehow the stars aligned, and then I got to do it with all of you guys, and it was such a dream.
Well, I will talk about casting each of you because I remember each of you so specifically. But Natalie, you've had a history with the show too.
Yeah. So yeah, I was probably, secreting it, since 8 years old. So my first time doing it, I was 14, like you, Mark. And
Did
it was
you play Baby John too?
I didn't play. I played all the characters. No, like that Cher. I still watch it once a year.
If anybody doesn't know, Google Cher West Side Story, where she plays all of the characters. It's amazing.
You'll thank me later. So it was in high school, and I was the dance captain. And so I got to choreograph, and, because I was a little freshman, so they weren't going to cast me, but I got to be the assistant choreographer and the dance captain. And that was super fun because then I got really into, we didn't do original, but I tried my best to tone it down for high school students, and it was really fun.
And you've been studying it for a decade.
Of course.
In your basement, right?
Exactly. Knocking over chairs, breaking my toes. So then I did the musical theater project, or the Broadway theater project, with Anne Ranking. And she made me Anita. I was a 14-year-old Anita that summer. with all these 20-year-olds, but she thought it was really funny and really kind of cute, and was this great, like, I was like this little Spitfire Anita in her reimagining of America. But my first time doing it professionally was at Mill Mountain Theater, which is sadly no more, between my sophomore and junior year of college at NYU, and I booked Maria. And that's how I started. I started playing Maria. I played Maria twice. I played Maria at Mill Mountain, and I played Maria at Syracuse Stage. I loved it, except for the high C. But I loved it. I loved it. If it just sat a little lower, I'd say I could do it forever. Yeah. But it was, I could do it, not how I love to sing. So like, when something doesn't fit right, but I would do anything just to be a part of West Side. Yeah. And then of course, as I grew older and kept up with my dancing, I heard about the Broadway revival, and I just thought, they weren't looking at me at all. I was coming off of Chorus Line. They weren't, they're just not interested in me at all. And then it was finally up between me and Karen Olivo after they've looked through everyone else, and they were like, fine, we'll let the old girls come in. And seriously, we were like all of 28 at the time or something, or 30. And so Karen got it, but it turns out that I was 6 weeks pregnant at the time of my final callback, and I didn't know. So it was just meant to be, and Karen was amazing, and it was all meant to be. And then a year later, they asked me to come in and be her standby. And it couldn't have been more perfect. And I worked with Arthur Lawrence, and it was amazing. I did it every Sunday, so I wasn't killing myself as I was dropping baby weight. Like every single week, my dress had to be altered. They were so incredible at that theater, at the Palace Theater. It was joy.
That was the revival with directed by Arthur Lawrence and Joey McNeely. Mm-hmm. Right. Joey and I worked on Jerome Robbins together, right?
Right.
So that's amazing. And did you tour with it too?
I did not tour with it. Actually, my very good friend, Michelle Aravena, did Anita, and she was my understudy in Chorus Line. So it was just this amazing, it just creates this family. Yeah. There's something about, I think maybe the show has so much love and hate in it that in order to do it, you have to like push past that. And I love my Jet Boys. Yeah. I still, to this day, are connected to, because of that scene, because of that very, very, difficult, taunting scene. Right. The trust that scenes like that create, like, last forever. Right. But yeah, it's something that's really, it's just always been a part of my life.
And Matt, what was your first production?
My first production was the Paper Mill Playhouse.
No way!
Yeah, that was my first
production. I thought
production.
that was true, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So my experience, this is so wonderful to be able to talk to you guys about this, because as we're all surviving throughout this crisis and I'm teaching all these master classes, a question that I get all the time is just about mental health and how you persevere throughout this career, and what does it look like, and have you questioned your career before? And my right after the Book of Mormon, I just had this disastrous year of everything falling apart in my life. And I questioned if I even wanted to do this anymore. And I actually took almost a year off of auditioning. By the time that you'd seen me, it had almost been a year since I was in an audition room. Terrified my agent, basically told her to, go F off and and leave me alone. Told my agent to leave me alone. And I just didn't know if this really was what I wanted, because I had invested so much of myself into the negative sides of the business that overtake you when you're involved in this. It's the question of what's next. It's I need to do something better now. I need to top my last job. I'm not meeting the goals that I had set for myself that were unrealistic to begin with, but I did it anyways. And it's self-destructive as it could have possibly worked out, and I just was like, I haven't taken a moment. I had started working so young when I was like 19 years old. I hadn't taken a moment to reflect if this was really what I wanted. So I took a year away, and I was writing comic books at the time. I had a comic book deal, and I think I was even writing it throughout the rehearsal process on the side, right before I entered a scene. And I had gotten my personal training certificate, anything to prove to myself that I could survive financially without theater. And what had started to happen was my soul was starting to hurt a little bit without theater. And you asked me to come in for this role. And I had no intention of auditioning at first. And I kind of begrudgingly said, okay, I'll go in. And I went in, and even just singing Maria for you in the room that day, I remember like being so overcome with, oh gosh, I haven't done that in so long. I haven't been in an audition room in so long. I haven't felt that feeling of singing a good musical theater song, a really good musical theater song. And this is crazy. My grandmother was passing at the time. So I don't know if you remember, Mark, but I was like up until like 4 a.m. that night, crying and talking and on the phone. And I had no voice the next day. Absolutely no voice. Couldn't sing like above like a C natural. And I was just gone. And you asked me to come back in. And I was just so like, whatever. Let's go. Let's show up. I at least have to show up. This is just, of course, this is happening to me. And you, for whatever reason, believed that I should play this part. And I have to say, it brought me back to life. And I say that to everyone that I talk to about this, because what this show proved to me and this production proved to me, we were all there for the right reasons. We weren't transferring this to Broadway. We weren't trying to turn it into anything other than a really special, beautiful production of West Side Story for the Paper Mill Playhouse. And every wonderful actor in our cast was there for the same reason. Every creative team member was there for the same reason, to make a special, special production of West Side Story. And it was so special. And the heart and the love in the room brought me back to life. It reminded me why I need theater, why I do theater. There was no outside pressure. There was no bull crap that goes along with the industry. We were just there to create. And I was so overcome by it. And that production, the same casting director put me in the Sweeney Todd I did right after that. And I just kind of fell back into the industry, but it all led to wonderful things that I'm a part of now. And I owe so much to this production, and it was so healing for me, and I will cherish it for the rest of my life.
Well, those are incredibly kind words for all of us to hear. And I do remember that. I remember that very specifically. I remember we had seen so many people for this show. Everybody wanted to be in it. And great casting director from Telsey, who brought a lot of Tonys in front of me. And I said, they were all great, but they weren't right. I said, I'm so sorry, but I'm looking for that actor who is just on the edge, on the cusp. I kept saying boy man. He's right between boy man, right? He is taking a step into adulthood and having to leave everything else behind. His innocence, he's more mature than the people around him, but he doesn't know where he's going. He's, bright-eyed and energetic, and also has to sing this music, and has to pass for a teenager and all of that. And they said, well, I know who that is, but he's kind of out of the business. And I said, who is it? And they were like, Matt Doyle. I said, please have him come in, And I remember them saying, well, he's a physical trainer now. He's not really doing it. And I do remember specifically seeing you that the first time, and afterwards, it's one of those things that happens for me in the room immediately. I was like, okay, that's it. Now we always have to have a callback just so that everybody gets together, but you'd already had the part before you came to the callback. So it didn't matter that you couldn't sing or not, because you had the innocence.
It was gone.
The voice and all of that I wanted, and you were that boy man. You're right on the edge.
I remember walking out after trying to just get through the song, and
Yeah.
all the other Tonys that were singing their faces off that day. Glorious voices at that
Yeah, they were.
callback, by the way.
They were all
And
amazing.
just staring at me like, "You all right, man?"
Little did they know that I'd already written your name on the page.
When they found out that I got it, they must have been so angry.
No. And, you know, in the same vein, Belinda, you had come to us, and actually, I think it was DJ Salisbury was that right? Who had directed that production with Alex.
Yep.
DJ and I have known each other for decades. And he said to me, the woman who played Maria for me is coming in, and just don't overlook her. Take a special look at that. And I trust him very much. And it's, you know, Maria is a role close to my heart only because my mother's name is Marie. And so it's always had this, you know, otherworldly meaning for me. And that last scene is make or break for me. She, again, that role has to have the innocence, has to have the high C, has to, again, be on the verge of womanhood in between, but has to have that fire and the hurt and the ability to play that last scene. And I remember you coming in and doing that scene in the audition room. Do you remember?
I do, yeah.
And just tears and breaking down and the multi-levels about it. And I was like, that's it, Belinda Allyn, there you go. And the two of you together were magical. Really.
we had a good time together.
About singing the duet tonight and the journey that those two characters go through in that song, the challenge vocally of delivering it, but just the joy in your faces of discovering each other and touching each other for the first time, and really, you know, showing the audience and everyone the love and the emotion you're feeling, which transcends the, you know, the us and them, you know, storyline that is the show. And we'll get into that too. And I just want to talk about Natalie, and then we can get into the show and why I think it's so important, why I want to hear from you. But Natalie too. And I knew you had done the show before. And again, you had just had a baby. You came to audition for us. And I think Anita is one of the toughest roles in musical theater to cast, because no one forgives you on the dancing. You have got to deliver that choreography. And you've got to be an actress of such depth, right? It is a complicated role. And you talk about the taunting scene and what that is, going with the best of intention and then filled with hatred, and how the whole show turns in that moment. But the maturity, needing the maturity, she's a woman who's only a few years older than Maria, right, and the rest of them. But she's taking on the role of mother for that whole community. And I remember your dancing was great. Your singing was amazing, really spectacular. I didn't know you'd been Maria. I could have cast you as Belinda's, you know, matinee cover, right? You guys could have swapped roles. But it was the acting to me that a dancer who can't deliver those scenes doesn't work in that role. And you have to have all of those levels, and you did in spades. And I was thrilled when you joined the company. We were like, okay.
Thank you.
Oh no, it was amazing.
No, it was, well, it's, you know, it's my drop the baby weight plan. So I had to book it. You know, it's what I did the first time around, and it worked.
Every time you have a baby, you have to play Anita.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no more. This factory's closed. But but what I will say also was, you know, Matt was talking about how he was personally being healed, and Matt and I go way back. We did Giant together at the Public Theater. We worked with Michael Greif. We worked with your baby John. So, which is amazing to me. I think I remember him telling us that once, but that's
so funny.
Such an image. But I will say, for those of us who had worked with Arthur, the good and the bad of it, because he was brilliant, but he was also terrifying, and he lived up to his reputation.
Right.
It was also very healing for those of us who had done the Broadway show and decided to do the Paper Mill show. It was very healing for us to be able to work with a director that listened to us, that and that we could bring the heart of it without the fear of it. So it was a beautiful experience for us, and I think for some of those people that came from the Broadway show, it was necessary because they were very young when they did it on Broadway.
Right.
And I think it healed them to get a chance to do it their way.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Oh, listen, thank you. It's a challenging piece in so many ways. I think it's so important that the youth is underscored, right? It has to be, for me anyway, it is about that moment, I've said it to all of you, when you cross through the door, when your innocence is shattered. And that happens in a lot of ways. Finding the true love in your life, getting married, becoming an adult. What is that thing? What is it that makes you, sometimes pushes you and sometimes invites you? This one definitely is pushes you into the reality that life's not always going to be innocent and naive. And that, I think, was one of the things that this company delivered. And I think it's a message, unfortunately, but fortunately, that theater does so well, about us versus them, right? That there's always, unfortunately, in life, that dividing line, which is why I think we retell this story so many times. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that, about your experience. Certainly, Belinda, you were talking to me before about being raised in Arkansas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being the only mixed race person in your community, right?
Yeah.
And I think West Side speaks to that, but talk a little bit about your personal experience of that and why the show is so important.
The story of West Side, unfortunately, I don't know if it will ever become irrelevant. Whether it's sexuality, whether it's race, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, there are people who believe that you should not be with the person that you love. And growing up in a very conservative part of the country with parents of two different races and not thinking of that until I moved there at age 10 and realizing that people thought that was weird and crazy and didn't know where to put you as a mixed race person, didn't necessarily believe that your parents should love each other. Just makes that story very personal. The story of forbidden love, the story of love conquering hatred that has plagued your culture and systemic issues for years and generations. So that is why I love the show so much, because I think that it just shows the love not only between Maria and Tony, but also I think the thing that I discovered the second time and last time I did this show with all of you was the relationship between Anita and Maria. And Anita selflessly, after the love of her life is murdered, she is trying to help her sister. And then she gets raped. I mean, it's just the craziest culmination of events, but it's also not unrealistic, especially in a community of color. But she still loves Maria the whole time. And so just to see how love always transcends the hatred is so beautiful as a mixed race person. And especially in 2020, which I didn't think that this would have to be a conversation anymore, but it is, and it's so beautiful and so vital for our world.
And Natalie, you even talked about, you said specifically, and it resonated with me, I love my Jets. And I think you say that the rest of that sentence is in spite of what we have to live through on stage, right?
Yes. I think that when you do something on stage that requires a very scary, vulnerable element, where whether it's, you know, these sweet dancing men being rapists, which you kind of see them go through an interesting process the first time they start doing the scene, you know, and it's always, and when the director is great, the actress that plays Anita is very much in control of what's happening. So everything is done with permission, everything, and you kind of lead up to the violence at first. You learn it like a dance, right? You learn the fight choreography like a dance, and then it just gets piled on until you kind of take away the politeness. And it's when you take away that politeness that, as much as a love scene can connect two people, hate scenes can too. And it's because of that trust. Underneath all of that unbridled hate and fear is this trust that I know you as an actor, you know me as an actor. That's how I can let you go so far, and that's how you can let me fight you so much. And then it stops being polite, and it's very exciting, and it is very, I mean, there are days, even after like the 6 times 7 productions I've done, and like 4 as Anita, I think, there are always days, at least 2 days a week, where I get off the stage after, and I need a hug from action.
Yeah.
There's a bonding that happens there, where you kind of weirdly apologize, and you say it's all good, everything's okay, and he checks in and makes sure that, did I do anything inappropriately, did I do anything to trigger you? And there's this amazing, I mean, I'm even getting teary-eyed about it because it happened a couple of times, even in our production, and I would go to Matt's room, you know, and hang out with Mikey, and, you know, and we would just kind of brought up some stuff today, and that's when you know you can trust your guys. And in terms of Maria, I have a sister, so that sister relationship, even though we're technically not blood sisters, you know, but that sister relationship is real. It's very deep to me, and it's very important, because it has to be so strong, and that love is so imperative for her to get herself to, and her love for Bernardo, both combining, are the perfect storm that sent her to the drugstore.
Yeah, and I think that the way that the show is most poignant and moving is that the love is as intense as the hate and the violence.
Yes.
And that it's coming out of a world of basically children who should know better but don't seem to. It's very reflective of a lot of what's happening and continues to happen around us, unfortunately. The thing that I always think is so important about the show is that at the end, there's a spark of hope that something has been learned from this tragedy of the deaths of Bernardo and Tony. That forgiveness is on the horizon, and that we have to come together. That final moment that to me is so beautifully staged and choreographed in the Robbins choreography of the ballet, which is why I think that's such an important moment in the show. And then mirrored at the end when the two sides, the Jet and the Sharks, come together and walk off the stage, certainly not arm in arm, hand in hand, but in a way looking forward to, we can't let this continue. You know, we have to find a way to live together, to find the good in each other.
You know, Mark, during our production, and it's something that I'll never forget, Pulse happened a couple weeks into our run, and the Pulse shooting happened, and it was such strange day to wake up at the time. At the time, it was one of the more major shootings to happen. Now it seems like it's a drop in the hat because that's the state that we're in lately in our country, which is just devastating. But at the time, it was, coming to work that day was very, very difficult. And we all had to kind of check in with one another. And to Natalie's point, we had such a special group. And, with both of these women here, first and foremost, Natalie and I played lovers in Giant, and then I fell in love with Belinda, and I've never felt safer with people before. I mean, to be up there with these two leading ladies that I trusted so intensely and could come to work on a day like that after that event and know that I had them, I had Mikey, I had this unbelievable cast that just was so protective and so sincere and so loving. And that's what we had in that room. And it was beautiful. And I'll never forget Belinda in the final scene, breaking down. I didn't know if she was going to be able to get through it. And it still brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. And it was one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. And I was playing dead on stage during it. But you were holding my hand at the time, Belinda, and when you were really losing it, and I had to give you a good squeeze there for a second and make sure, Tony came alive for a moment. Check in with his Maria. And it's, to your point, Belinda, I don't know if there's ever going to be a time where this show isn't relevant, and that's very sad. But, gosh, that's why we need theater. That is why we need theater. That's
Right.
why.
I think so. I think you're right. And we have to remember German too. What an incredible commando, right?
So
the whole
good.
company, spectacular, but he's the other, part of this quartet. Who's
God.
such a strong, just a man who loves his family and his country, both his, his country of birth and the country in which he currently lives. And, just a great, great performer and a great guy. But I do think it's so important, and it's what theater does so well. It shines a mirror on society. I mean, unfortunately, there's going to be people who always hate other people without reason, and that sometimes leads to violence, and it's so wrong and bad. And if moments like this, if productions like this can open the audience's eyes a little bit to see beyond the world in which they've been raised, and to accept those who look different, act different, have different belief systems than them, then we've done our job, right? And I do tend to think, just closing it out, that what Belinda said is right, which I think, and it is the message of the show, I think, and it should be the message we all live by, which is that love transcends all, right? And if we can just find a way to find the commonality between us and know that, we all want the same things. We all want to feel safe, to have families, to whether, biological, created, married, whatever, or a theatrical family like this one. And that we want to live in a world where we can be happy and grow and prosper. And that takes many, many different people to do that successfully. Then it's great. And I think that's what this production delivered in spades. And I couldn't be more grateful to each of you and to everyone who was in it, every single member of the company, because I think that's what made it special and successful.
Well, and I think we would be remiss to not thank you and not to blow anything up your booty, but honestly, for me, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I'm sure that you would both be in agreement. I would never have been able to be vulnerable in that final scene to the degree that I was able to be had I not felt safe in that room with our fellow castmates, and also with you and with Alex Sanchez. And amazing, Alex. But the safety that was created to just feel our feelings and go to the extremes, and also to reel it in when we weren't ready to go there in a rehearsal.
Yeah.
To just have that full freedom was so amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh. I wish we could just stay on and talk for hours. I
I
could.
know.
We need to have a little reunion and
Yeah.
maybe, raise a glass, get everybody together, Alex, our whole team,
Find
Mikey,
a nice
Thurman.
outdoor restaurant somewhere.
Yeah,
Hey, the carriage house.
Exactly. Sounds good.
yeah,
There
it
we
would be
go.
great. I would love it. And I would also love the opportunity to be back in the room with each of you individually or together working on another show because it was fun. This should not be the end of our journey. It's just
No,
one step in it.
that's
So, and
right.
you're all in the Paper Mill family now forever. Um, I know that Matt and Natalie did the show, and then Belinda came back and did Benny and June
I
and
know.
Beauty and the Beast with
Beauty
us.
and the Beast.
So we got to find some more projects to bring us back together. But
I'd
thank you
love
for
it.
spending this time with us. I love you all, and I will see you very soon.
Yes. Love you guys.
Hey, love you guys.
Love you.
Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Be sure to come back next week when we'll discuss the art of scenic design with award-winning scenic designer David Corrins. See you then.